Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Sophia Nalvaya from Government Mira Girls College, and today we are discussing the summary of chapter number 1 to 4 Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. The novel starts with the lines: "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." The news that a wealthy young gentleman named Charles Bingley has rented the manor known as Netherfield Park causes a great stir in the neighbouring village of Longbourn, especially the Bennet household. The Bennets have 5 unmarried daughters, and Mrs. Bennet, a foolish and fussy gossip, is the sort who agrees with the novel's opening words. She firmly believes that Mr. Bingley is um, going to be the great opportunity for capturing a match for one of her daughters, and she therefore insists that her husband call on the new arrival immediately. Mr. Bingley Bennet torments his family by pretending to have no interest in doing so, but eventually he meets Mr. Bingley without their knowing. When he reveals to Mrs. Bennet and his daughters that he has made their new neighbor acquaintance, they are overjoyed and excited. Eager to learn more, Mrs. Bennet and the girls question Mr. Bennet incessantly. A few days later, Mr. Bingley returns the visit, though he does not meet Mrs. Bennet and the daughters. The Bennets invite him to dinner shortly afterwards, but Mr. Bingley has to go off to London, so he is not able to make it for the dinner. However, he returns to Netherfield Park with his 2 sisters, his brother in law, and his friend named Mr. Darcy. Mr. Bingley and his guests go to a ball in the nearby village of town of Meryton. The Bennet sisters attend the ball with their mother. The eldest daughter, Jane, is invited for dance twice by Mr. Bingley. Within Elizabeth's hearing, Bingley exclaims to Darcy that Jane is the most beautiful creature he has ever beheld. Bingley suggests now here the number of females are quite more than the number of males. So Mr. Bingley suggests that why doesn't he take up a partner? But Darcy refuses. When Bingley suggests that Darcy dance with Elizabeth, Darcy says she is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. Elizabeth thus takes an immediate and understandable dislike for Mr. Darcy, and because of Darcy's comments and refusal to dance with anyone not rich and well bred, the neighborhood similarly takes a similar dislikes and takes him as a snob. On the other hand, Mr. Bingley is taken to be quite amiable. At the end of the novel, the Bennet women return to their house, where Mrs. Bennet regales her husband with stories from the ball until and unless Mr. Bennet tells her to be quiet. Uh, Upstairs in the room, Jane relates to Elizabeth that she is quite surprised that Mr. Bingley has danced with her twice. And Elizabeth tells Jane that she is unaware of her own beauty. Both the girls agree that the Bingley sisters are not well mannered, but whereas Jane insists that they are charming in close conversation, Elizabeth continues to harbour a dislike for them. The narrator then provides the reader with Mr. Bingley's background, who has inherited a large fortune, but as his sisters complain, has decided to lives on rent as of now. Mr. Darcy does not approve much of Jane and says that she smiles too much, but both the Bingley sisters find Jane to be a sweet girl, and this makes Mr. Bingley more confident of his opinion about Jane. The opening sentence, now let's do a quick critical analysis of chapter number 1 to 4. The opening sentence of the novel, Pride and Prejudice: "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." It establishes the centrality of advantageous marriage, a fundamental social value of Regency England. The arrival of Mr. Bingley and the news of his fortune majorly is the event that sets the novel in motion. He delivers the prospect of a marriage of wealth and good connections for the eager Bennet girls, The opening sentence has a subtle, unstated significance. In its declarative and hopeful claim that a wealthy man must be looking for a wife, it hides beneath its surface the truth of such matters. A single woman must be in want of a husband, especially a wealthy one. The first chapter consists almost entirely of dialogue, a typical characteristic of Jane Austen's technique. It is a manner in which her characters express themselves to reveal their traits and attitudes. It's the last paragraph in which the narrator describes Mr. Bennet as a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice, and his wife as a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. This simply confirms the character's assessment of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet so far. Mr. Bennet Mrs. Bennet embodies ill breeding and is prone to monotone hysteria. Mr. Bennet is a wit who retreats from his wife's overly serious demeanor. There is little physical descriptions of the characters in Pride and Prejudice, so the reader's perception of them is shaped largely by their words. Darcy makes the importance of verbal explicit in the end of the novel when he tells Elizabeth that he was first attracted to her by the liveliness of her mind. The ball at Meryton is important to the structure of the novel since it brings the two couples, Darcy and Elizabeth, Bingley and Jane, together for the first time. Austen's original title for the novel was First Impressions, and these individuals' first impression at the ball initiate the contrasting patterns of the two principal male-female relationships. The relative effortlessness with which Bingley and Jane interactive is indicative of their easygoing natures. In fact, the obstacles that the novel places in the way of their happiness is in no way initiated or triggered by them. They are more subject to the pain that they have to face. And there is also another noteworthy thing that there is no development of love in case of Jane and Bingley. The feelings for each other remain moreover majorly the same. Darcy's bad behavior, on the other hand, immediately betrays his pride and sense of social superiority that will almost hinder him from finding his way to Elizabeth. His snub of her creates a mutual dislike in contrast to the mutual attraction between Jane and Bingley. Further, while Darcy's opinion of Elizabeth changes within a few chapters, her sense of him as first impression and arrogant remains unaltered until midway through the novel. So that is all about chapter number 1 to 4. I hope this discussion will be helpful. In the next video, we will be discussing chapter number 5 to 8. Thank you.